Yeah, it was just disgusting because these zero units helped keep American troops, elite troops mainly, and CIA officers out of harm's way. And to then turn around and sort of play politics with that and say, "Oh, it's Biden's fault," and yeah, it's just sickening.
I think there is an effective and responsible way to employ our Title 50 covert action authorities against drug cartels in Latin America. However, I reiterate, it should not generate headlines. It needs to follow U.S. and international law, and it must be done in concert with a whole bunch of other efforts across law enforcement, the rest of the intelligence community, to sort of tamp down those cartels' operations and supply lines into the United States and address the underlying societal issues that draw Americans to want to consume those illegal narcotics.
Secrets and Spies presents Espresso Martini with Chris Carr and Matt Fulton.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Espresso Martini. This is our first one in a while, and I apologize. Unfortunately, I had a very nasty cold, possibly the flu, but the doctor refused to call it the flu, that knocked me out for about 14 days, and it was not fun. So unfortunately, that messed up our schedule completely. So this is our first time back, and it's our last Espresso Martini of the year.
Yeah.
So this may end up being quite a long one, or it might not. But Matt, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, stranger? Good to see you.
Yeah, no, I'm okay now. Today, I was just saying to you off air, today is the first day where I felt human again. I still have, you can probably hear I've still got a bit of this cold in me. So it obviously is enjoying its stay in my body, so it doesn't want to quite leave just yet. So, but I have started drinking whiskey every day, and I feel like that has helped. So it either makes it easier to get through it, or it's helping my chest. I don't know.
Really?
But yeah, one glass of whiskey a day now, just to get
It
through.
might qualify you to be Secretary of War. The more you drink of that stuff.
Yeah, it could do. It could do. That's the main qualification, isn't it?
I'll set the tone for this one.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah. So, just to quickly tell you what we're up to today. So, we're going to be covering the DC shooter and his potential links to the CIA. We're going to be looking at the Ukraine peace deal troubles, and then we're going to be looking at a senior Russian general who was spotted in Venezuela. And then we'll talk a little bit about the rise of ISIS in Syria. And then we have two listener questions as well that we're going to look at. So we've got two articles that listeners have suggested to us. One about pigeons that may be being kind of controlled by the Russian government, which is kind of an interesting one. And then we've got a little bit about Pete Hegseth, our current Secretary of Defense / War, depending on which side of the spectrum you want to put that. So before we kick off, there's a few things I just wanted to say to everybody. So firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody listening out there, because we definitely couldn't do this podcast without you, and we deeply appreciate your continued support. And I also want to say a huge thank you to our Patreon subscribers who've been supporting us financially. You know, thank you so much for doing that. It really does help us. It helps us upgrade our equipment and make little tweaks. It recently it's given me the opportunity to go and travel to some places like Oxford, Manchester, and Dorchester to go and cover some events. So, you know, thank you very much for that. Now, next year's our 10th anniversary. In fact, September is the month that the podcast started. So, you know, to think that this podcast is 10 years old and the way it started, you know, it was just me chatting to people. And then now it's been wonderful to bring you on board, Matt. And, thank you again for your support and your efforts on this show. You know, because I really feel like I couldn't kind of continue doing it without you. So thank you. And, you know, and I've just been reflecting on a few things and realized that we kind of need your help a little bit out there. You know, I would like to, for our 10th anniversaries, really kind of grow this show. And I'd love to be able to double our listenership by this time next year. So we get roughly somewhere between 30 to 40,000 listens a month, which is amazing. You know,
It's pretty good.
It's not bad at all.
As far as podcasts go, we're no slouches.
Exactly. And considering we run this just between us, there's no marketing team, there's no social media team, there's no editing team. I'm the editing team at times, and oh my goodness. And sometimes I feel it. And God, would I love to be able to hire an editor? Wouldn't that be nice? But so anyway, so how do we double our listenership? So obviously, there's going to be things that we do next year. We're going to try and get more press, guests on more podcasts, up our social media game. Those are things that we're going to do. But there's some things I'd like to ask of you as well, if you can. First of all, please could you share episodes you like? You can share via social media. You could send it to, you can send an email to people who might be interested. If you could do that, that would make a big effort for us. So sharing episodes, especially on social media, because we get a lot of likes, which is really appreciated. But sadly, likes don't help people discover the show. It's really sharing that works. So as I jokingly say, sharing is caring. But please share as much as you can. Also, recommend us to podcast fans. If you've got a friend who's talking about how they like certain podcasts and you think that this podcast would be appropriate, please, if you aren't already, please do consider recommending us. And then another one as well, if you see any online awards that you think we deserve, please consider nominating us, because I've seen some awards where we could nominate ourselves.
The Nobel Peace Prize. We need the Nobel Peace Prize next year. We better get it or else.
Yeah, Nobel Peace Prize being one. That's it. Okay. That's what we're going for. Nobel Peace Prize winning podcast. Imagine that.
I won't be your friend anymore if you don't give me the Nobel Peace Prize.
That'd really upset President Trump. So it kind of feels a bit wrong nominating yourself for something. So if somebody sees something, you think, you know what, they deserve it, please nominate us. That'd be really nice, because with those awards, they really do a good job of sharing the podcasts that are kind of nominated out to a wider audience. And so again, that helps our visibility, because that's what we're trying to do. And then lastly, if you see any journalists or influencers sort of writing or sharing podcasts, and you think, again, that we'd be appropriate, please share, please recommend us to them, because that'd be really great. All those things, none of those things cost anything. Those are all free things, and that would really all help us a lot. And then lastly as well, if you do want to share our podcast via social media, but you feel like you're missing something, you feel like there's something we need to give you as in an asset, like a photograph or a clip or something, let us know. If there's something that we're not quite doing with the social media side of it, you think, God, if only they did this, let us know what that only thing is. What is that thing that we're not doing? I mean, there's quite a few things we're probably not doing at the moment, but let us know specifically if there's a particular thing that you really need that would make it easier for you to share an episode. Let us know. Email us at secretsandspiespodcast@gmail.com. That is the best way to get in touch with us. Bear in mind, it is only me and Matt, so sometimes the people email us at a time and then I forget about it or forget out. I'm only a human being, so I do sometimes get a bit overwhelmed. And recently we've had an awful lot of requests for interviews, which is wonderful, but we're kind of being a bit bombarded. So if we take a little while to get back to you, I apologize in advance, but it's nothing malicious. It's just because it's us.
Two guys with day jobs on opposite ends of the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. So it's crazy. But honestly, I love doing this podcast, and I'd love to see it going for another 10 years or more. I mean, maybe we can give, like, I don't know, those TV shows that keep going, like Law and Order, a run for their money when they're like on season 30 or something. You never know. I mean, maybe you'd be tired of us by 30 years. I don't know. But if you're not, that'd be great. So those are the things I really have asked of you. And then lastly, the last thing, I'll just do a quick Patreon plug, because obviously you can directly support the show on Patreon. Again, thank you so much to those who already are. And what you get in exchange for that is you get ad-free versions of the video and audio podcasts. And that's what we give away on Patreon. So that would be wonderful. And if subscription's not your thing, that's totally fine. You can always drop us a one-off donation via Buy Me a Coffee. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/secrets and spies, choose an amount you're happy with, and we'd be more than grateful for that. So thank you. And as a big coffee lover myself, that would be really nice. So thank you.
Reviews too.
Oh, and yes, reviews. If you do, if you enjoy a particular episode or enjoy the podcast in general, please do leave us a review, preferably a 5-star review, but leave us a review on your podcast app.
Yeah, if you're mad at us, just email us, secretsandspiespodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you're mad, just email us. We get enough.
That's fine.
We get enough of those, don't we?
Yeah. It's totally cool.
Yeah. So yeah, a huge thank you to everybody who's watching us and listening to us for your support. For the last 9 years that we've been podcasting, we couldn't do it without you. We very much appreciate your support, and we just hope we can make this podcast even better. That's our goal.
You did this on your own for years before I, walked through the wall like the Kool-Aid guy, How you did that on your own for so long is beyond me. Doing this with you for the relatively short time that I have been doing it is just kind of astounding.
Wow, it's been about 3.5 years, isn't it? I think,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah, time flies when you're having fun. Yeah.
Honestly, man, it's been great having you aboard. Because it was getting a bit crazy doing it on my own. It was about good 5 years solid, I think, and
You know what? I think it's good.
Mm.
I think it's a good accountability system. I think me personally, I think it would be, not having the backing of a production company or something behind us or anything legit, I say in air quotes like that. I think it would be difficult to do it if it was just me and I didn't also have to show up and produce. Not that I love doing this. I would love to do this full time and just this. There's so much more I could do with the bandwidth to do so here. But I think having doing this with a partner and having someone to be accountable for and be like, okay, I got to do this because I can't let Chris down, really, for me at least, helps keep this going.
No, me too. Honestly, it makes a huge difference. And just being able to have somebody else who's sort of just to bounce off, really, because it can get very lonely and
It's
also
very lonely.
And just getting a vibe check. And here's another shout out I'll quickly do as well. So recently I went to Spy Q in Dorchester, and I was very lucky to meet 3 of our listeners in the flesh. It's a very rare thing when I actually meet a listener. I've only met a handful of people who listen to this podcast in person who I didn't know before. So I met Stephanie, Sarah, and Graham at Spy Q. Had a lovely conversation with all of them, and I shared a train journey back to London with Stephanie, which was really wonderful. I hope I didn't bore her after 2.5 hours of being stuck with me, but it was really, really interesting just meeting and chatting and finding out what what you do and don't like and so on. More what you do like. I don't think it was much that you didn't like, but the Espresso Martinis are very much considered an important thing by some of the listeners, and it's
surprises me, honestly, pleasantly surprises me. That's great, that's awesome. But it's I have not to get on the therapist couch or anything. I have a chronic inability to judge how others view my work.
Yeah, it is hard.
So there's always what do people actually think? Do they really care? Do they like me? And it's good to hear once in a while that people do.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be honest. This is the show that makes me the most nervous to do every week, every time we do one, because suddenly we're the ones who has to sort of try and become the experts as much as we can. And I don't feel like I'm an expert in anything, and some 1-star reviewers think that too. And don't read 1-star reviews if you're not well. So I appreciate the people are enjoying these espresso martinis, because I actually always walk away, even though I'm very nervous going into one, I walk away feeling quite satisfied most of the time. There's the odd episode where I feel like, could have done this, could have done that, but generally my goal with Espresso Martini has always been is just to highlight stuff that doesn't always get covered, because we do obviously cover some of the big stories, but there's today we're going to talk a little bit about ISIS in Syria, because things like that just don't come up in the press that often, because unless ISIS blow something up, typically blowing up a Westerner, then you'll hear about it. But generally 9 times out of 10 you won't. And with the way the news is at the moment, we're focusing a lot on Russia because of Ukraine. We've had a lot of Chinese spy scandals in the UK, so there's a lot of press at the moment about China. But ISIS, in many ways, thankfully, doesn't get talked about much. But ISIS is still very much out there, as are Al-Qaeda in various forms, not quite as probably well-equipped and organized as ISIS is, but, they haven't gone away. Just because we don't hear about something doesn't mean it hasn't gone away. So that's always the thing. There are times where I take this episode into territory I know very little about, and I cock up occasionally, and I apologize for that. But my goal is to kind of just highlight things that we don't necessarily talk about a lot. And we try, if there's an episode, about something that I don't necessarily know a lot about, I do try and get a guest on either before or after that episode to kind of back up or revalidate what we talk about. And we make a great effort to draw from credible sources because, I mean, one last mini rant. I mean, like when I was ill, I spent a bit of time watching some other podcasts on YouTube, and I was just a little bit shocked about how sensationalist they were, and like to what large sort of response they get, whilst they clearly don't seem to care about the truth that much. They seem to care more about sensationalism.
We're leaving money on the table, Chris.
I know. If only I did steroids, shave my head, and love Trump, I could be a millionaire by the end of next year. But I sadly don't like Trump that much, so it's like I'm not on the MAGA train just yet. Don't plan to be anytime soon. But yeah, but I don't know. MAGA pays well online, and it's very sad. So it's sort of it's just a bit disheartening when I saw all that. And just seeing some, like, especially when there's been a guest that we've had on who has gone on to another podcast where they asked some very peculiar questions, and that show seems to get a lot more viewership, and it's just a bit disheartening sometimes. So not to pull out the violin or anything, but it was just like, wow, it was just my flu and my online activity was a bit of an education. I was like, wow. So there we go. So that's that really. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Matt, or are you happy to? No, cool.
No, we can get to it.
Cool. Well, let's get to business. So today, as I was saying earlier, I shared about a few interesting things. So the first one is about this terrible shooting that happened in DC. And obviously the three letters CIA came up, and then the internet lost its shit. So Matt, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so last week, the day before Thanksgiving, downtown Washington, D.C. saw a shooting that lands right in the shadow of America's largest war. Near the Farragut West Metro Station, 2 National Guard members were tragically gunned down. Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, 20, later died of her wounds, and Air Force Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, 24, remains in critical condition as of this recording. The alleged shooter is 29-year-old Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, an Afghan national who once fought alongside the CIA in one of its most controversial proxy forces, the Zero Units. According to detailed reporting by Kevin Maurer in Rolling Stone, Lakhanwal, known as Shafiq in Kandahar, spent nearly a decade in a CIA-backed strike unit before he and his family were evacuated to the United States in 2021. They were resettled in Bellingham, Washington, under Operation Allies Welcome, but instead of a clean slate, he ran into a tangle of isolation, bureaucracy, and apparent untreated mental illness. Despite having asylum and work authorization on paper, he was fired from a laundromat job for missing physical documents. A housing application written by his nephew described him as fearful after an assault on the street, struggling with English, and desperate to move nearer to an Afghan community where he might feel safer and find work. Friends say that by this year he was unable to cover rent or food and was borrowing from other veterans. They describe him cycling between long stretches of withdrawal, weeks without speaking even to his family, and sudden road trips across the country. A community advocate, worried he might be suicidal, flagged his case to a refugee organization. Staff visited, but Lakhanwal and his family turned down help. In June, he tried one more avenue, posting in a group chat tied to a CIA program meant to help Zero Unit veterans with immigration problems. Screenshots show his pleas for assistance. His last message went unanswered and was deleted by an administrator. The CIA has not commented, and investigators have not yet established a clear motive for the attack. Politically, the response was pretty immediate. President Trump called it a, quote, terrorist attack and ordered a full review of all Afghans admitted under the Biden administration. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, Vice President J.D. Vance, FBI Director Kash Patel, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe have all blamed the Biden administration, arguing that people like Lakhanwal were essentially, quote, unvetted and should never have been allowed in. But that sits uneasily with the record of the Zero Units. These were some of the most heavily screened Afghan partners the U.S. ever recruited, then re-vetted before evacuation, and again before receiving special immigrant visas, which Lakhanwal did in April of this year. So this isn't just a tragic crime in downtown D.C., it's a stress test of how America treats the people it arms and deploys, and what happens when those partners feel like the promise ended the moment the war was over. Chris, what'd you think about this one?
Well, you put it beautifully at the end there. I mean, first of all, I just want to say up front that obviously this attack was terrible, and my heart goes out to those who've been killed and wounded and their families and friends. The survivors of this will be carrying mental scars for years after experiencing such a life event, not just those who were shot, but those who are in the proximity of it as well. Really horrific stuff. And looking at the wider picture, I mean, obviously, first of all, I mentioned when we started this that when it was first reported there was a CIA connection to the shooter, it led to all sorts of, typical crazy speculation online. You had far left commentators who saw this some sort of CIA Trump admin conspiracy, and then you had those on the far right who saw it as some sort of deep state conspiracy looking to target Trump in some way. And both are complete nonsense.
It's just so depressing that we have to do this with everything now.
Yeah. As soon as those three letters come up, or FBI or something, it just leads to this ridiculous speculation.
Yeah.
And what's, as I've said this many times before, conspiracy theories, what they tend to do is typically overshadow something else. And this story is a tragedy on multiple levels. It's a tragedy for those who were killed and wounded. I think that, what Larkenwall did was inexcusable. But if we kind of look into the road that led him there, I think there's some missed opportunities. There usually are with these cases, sadly, even with terrorism cases. I mean, Trump wants to call this a terrorism case. Is it a terrorism case? I'm not sure, but it sort of falls into a wonky it falls into a slightly strange territory whether it really was terrorism or not. But I'm not going to go into whether it was or not. I'll let you decide, and better educated people can tell me if it was. But in this case, the tragedy is it's a result of a man who worked for the CIA in Afghanistan, who did put his life on the line to help US troops and CIA officers in very dangerous places. And because of his work for the CIA, he obviously qualified to be resettled in the USA, and he and his family escaped persecution from the ruling Taliban who took over back in 2021. Now, as per this article and other reporting I've seen, it looks like that the US government obviously did one thing right, and that was getting this man and other allies out of harm's way. But then once he was in America, it feels like he was effectively given very little support to adjust to life in America. And Larkenwall apparently had 5 sons and a wife to provide for. And it's reported he lacked English skills, and apparently he even lacked some paperwork to help him get work. And that he had to resort to then borrowing money from friends. This caused him great distress, and it's likely his mental health declined due to financial stresses and not being able to provide for his family. Because as a man, providing for your family in Middle Eastern culture is a big deal. It's quite a big deal in our culture too. And when you're short of money, and it repeatedly happens, it does really start to grate you. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who faced financial hardship at some point in their life who can understand where that can take you. Again, this doesn't excuse what he did, but I want to take us through the steps that led us to what he did. Now, obviously, there are plenty of Afghan veterans who have helped Americans who have found a way to kind of get on with living in America. But for many of them, obviously, it's been a shock to the system going from an elite combat unit to now becoming potentially an Amazon delivery driver, because quite a few of them have gone on to end up working in very
menial service jobs. Yeah.
I use the word menial. I don't mean it in a judgmental way, because I don't want to say that somebody who works for Amazon's a lesser person, because they're not. But you can imagine going from like high stress combat and being treated like the creme de la creme to then being an anonymous Amazon driver delivering to people's houses, to probably people who are not very grateful and probably don't treat you like a human being, because there's quite a few people out there who do act that way towards people. You can see how that can kind of, again, grate on you. But a lot of these other Afghan refugees are just getting on with it. But also then there's a mental health component probably connected to PTSD from his combat experiences that, again, has probably likely gone untreated. And so it just sounds to me like the CIA and the US government could have done a much better job of supporting the Afghan refugees who were evacuated, but they obviously did a great job in getting them out of harm's way. But it seems to me that the mental health and social adjustment aspects have been somewhat overlooked, and that may have even got worse under the new leadership of the CIA, because John Radcliffe, the current CIA director, I've got that right, haven't I? He was very dismissive.
It's a shockingly, nakedly political statement from him, from the CIA, like immediately afterwards. I can get more into that later, but yeah.
Yeah, it was just disgusting because these zero units helped keep American troops, elite
CIA
troops mainly, and
officers.
CIA officers out of harm's way. And to then turn around and sort of play politics with that and say, oh, it's Biden's fault. And yeah, it's just sickening.
And intensely vetted to get into these.
Yeah, they were.
These zero units never once had an instance of an insider attack in the entire time that they were in operation. That's how intensely vetted they were.
Yeah, they were the creme de la creme of the Afghan forces. And they're the guys who also protected American troops during the withdrawal. And so it's, yeah. So there's a big tragedy here. Ultimately, I think it stems a lot of it from just a lack of social support and mental health support that, frankly, is the thing that tends to always get overlooked in these situations. So, Matt, I'll hand over to you.
I think in this case, Chris, our immigration system let him down. I think the CIA let him down. I was incredibly disappointed to see in this reporting from the Rolling Stone that, in this group chat for former Zero Unit members who were now in the U.S., that, his last messages went unanswered and was deleted by an administrator. I'm a little unclear. It wasn't entirely clear in the article when that message was deleted, if it was before or after the attack. Like, I'm not sure what the timing is there.
Yeah, I hope we'll find out.
But still, our immigration system failed here. I think the CIA failed here, and in so doing, they failed these two service members who were, West Virginia National Guard service members who were away from their families the day before Thanksgiving, on a mission that a lot of people think is very much unnecessary and not. Yeah, I'll leave that alone. But yeah, one of whom now is dead, 20 years old. The other one, 24, still fighting for his life in the hospital. And just to go back to that statement from Director Radcliffe, he said, I'll read it here. He said, quote, "The Biden administration justified bringing the alleged shooter to the United States in September 2021 due to his prior work with the U.S. government, including CIA, as a member of a partner force in Kandahar, which ended shortly following the chaotic evacuation." And then he added, "This individual and so many others should have never been allowed to come here." And I just think the implication from the DCIA, no less, that the proper policy and outcome for these people who fought and sacrificed and bled in the service of the Central Intelligence Agency and the United States would have been to abandon them and their families to be tortured and executed by the Taliban because they don't match the administration's preferred ethnic makeup for this country is fucking vile.
Yeah. Honestly, Director Radcliffe, shame on you. Shame on you. That is fucking outrageous.
And I think, the locals we persuade to work with us while we're at war in their country have done far more for this country than almost any of the Pleistocene fossils dining on the patio at Mar-a-Lago. And I think turning around to abandon them and treat them as an invasive species now will cause demonstrable harm the next time we ask for help. I don't think this is a tragedy. This is horrible. This is outrageous. He's been charged for murder, and that's right now. What's done is done. Nothing about this, what happened here, is unique to him being an Afghan and an asylum seeker. There are anyone who's having a mental health crisis can get a hold of a gun in this country and go out in public and shoot anybody.
And plenty do.
There have been plenty other American veterans of the war on terror of Afghanistan who've come back home and committed violent acts.
Or committed suicide as well. Yeah.
Right. One of whom a year ago blew himself up in a Cybertruck in front of Trump's hotel in Vegas.
Come up to the anniversary of that.
This is not something unique to Afghans.
I know. The wrong lessons are being learned from this because Trump has turned this into an anti-immigration thing because it suits his politics. But really, this is a social care and mental health caring for the people who helped you issue. Is what it is. I can't think of what's the better way to put that.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Is that
horrible tragedy what happened here. And avoidable.
Avoidable. Yeah, totally avoidable. And this got more press possibly because of the CIA connection, and just because it was,
And the
shooting
immigration
it.
thing, it's a perfect storm here in D.C., a block from the White House. I know the area well. The day
Oh,
before
we've been there, haven't
Thanksgiving.
we? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just tailor-made for the moment we're in right now.
Yeah, yeah, very sad, very tragic. So, yeah, hearts do go out to the victims of this, on so many levels. So, yeah, so I think that's. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or
No, very, very sad story, and I think unfortunately a lot of people, innocent people, are gonna suffer because of this guy's actions.
yeah, yeah, indeed. I think that's. Yeah, members of the Zero units and other Afghan allies are quite concerned at the moment. It came across in that article. Now, who is the reporter for that article? Because he was very interesting. Because
Kevin
he's
Maurer?
doing that's it. Yeah, because he's planning to do a documentary on the Zero units, and he's done other articles about the Zero units prior to this.
Reach out to him.
Yeah, reach out to him in the new year and see if we can get him on to talk about Zero units and all this because, yeah, he's very connected to all the community out there at this time. So yeah,
I would be very curious to know about the timing of
yes.
that last message he sent to that CIA group chat, and when was that ignored, and when was that message deleted? I would like to know. Was it before the shooting or was it after the shooting? That's a very big question to me.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Matt. Well, let's take a break and be back for more. So, our next story is about the ongoing saga that is the Ukraine peace deal. Because it stumbled yet again. And there's a good piece in The Guardian about potentially why it stumbled. This article blames Putin. Yeah. So, despite pressures from the Trump administration on Kyiv to make concessions, negotiations have hit the same roadblock as they always have, which is Putin's refusal to compromise on territorial control and Ukraine's political future. Publicly, Moscow framed the talks as productive, but made clear that some US proposals were unacceptable, and this allowed Russia to appear cooperative while still signaling it plans to keep fighting until its demands are met. Analysts note that the session was essentially Putin presenting Russia's non-negotiable preconditions and not a genuine attempt to find middle ground, which kind of has shades of Alaska. And the Kremlin is waiting to see if Trump will shift his stance. And Putin is reportedly tired of informal envoys like Steve Witkoff and prefers a return to traditional diplomatic working groups to handle the complex issues he can only ultimately decide in a deal. So both sides do try to avoid appearing as the obstacle to peace, but the US officials stress that only Putin has the authority to end Russia's side of the conflict, and he is not prepared to do so. So, yeah, I think the problem is that this particular plan had very shaky foundations before it even started.
Yeah.
But yes, I think Putin is still to blame because he could end this war tomorrow. But anyway, Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
I think time is a flat circle, Chris. That's what I think.
Time is a flat circle. I like it.
How
Not
many?
a flat Earth, then.
No, we would get good YouTube views there if we said that. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. I mean, how many times have we talked about essentially this exact same situation in the last year alone? I mean, you mentioned Alaska too. I couldn't tell you how that moved the situation, what came of that, other than some bad photo ops, some embarrassing photo ops. It's like the terms of some new deal surfaces. Ukraine gets bullied with threats of, this is our best and final. No, really, we mean it this time, _final, all caps, except by this date or else. There's outrage and panic across, Europe and people who care about Ukraine here in the US. The administration, officials like Marco Rubio start walking it back a little bit and, leak to Republicans, traditional-ish Republicans in Congress, like, hey, it's not going to be that bad. We're going to change the terms of the deal, whatever. Witkoff or Rubio fly off to speak to the Russians for the umpteenth time, and then nothing happens. It just seems like we're in this sort of cycle, almost to the point that when the terms of this deal came out, I wanted to immediately sort of see it as, they're saying this is it. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because they've said this 100 times before. Will that end? Will that sort of framework of a deal that does eventually end this thing, will that happen eventually? Yes. What would that look
Mm.
like? I still don't know. I don't think it's going to come soon, but it's just this sort of back and forth cycle, or that we go through with these terms, with these deals that nothing moves the needle. And yes, to your point, that's exactly right. Because Putin doesn't want to end the war. He's not ready to end the war. He's not in a position where he feels like he could end it advantageously to his terms. So he has to sort of force that or kick the can down the road until he does so. I don't know. You've, I think, followed this, the beats of this story much closer than I have in recent weeks. But
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, just to echo what you were saying a little bit, and I'll go. There is a thing here that might explain some of things, but what is frustrating is yet again the Trump administration are applying pressure on their allies and not Putin, who started this war and could end it tomorrow. Again, there was this sort of, as you were saying, this rushed panic. Suddenly there's this 28-point peace plan comes out, and suddenly Zelensky has to agree by Thanksgiving to this thing, which then causes total chaos for a week in
panic.
Europe.
Yeah.
Because then Zelensky flies out on the Friday, which is the day of, was it? Oh God, it was the day after Thanksgiving. He flew out, and I was really deeply concerned for his benefit because every time he flies out to meet with Trump and he doesn't have European leaders with him to back him up,
Yeah.
we end up in some sort of rehash of what happened with Trump and JD Vance. And I think Zelensky always needs to be accompanied by the British and French prime ministers, or the French president, the British prime minister, just purely because then it doesn't lead to these ridiculous situations. Now I'm kind of a bit. I'll go into a little bit about how we got to this latest plan. So according to the Wall Street Journal, the latest 28-point peace plan, which obviously is now stumbled, was apparently drawn up in Miami by Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and a Russian man called Kirill Dmitriev. And I hope I got his name right there. And he's the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund.
And very much spooked up and connected.
Yeah, massively. Yeah. And he's Putin's man in these negotiations. And Dmitriev was pushing for a plan for U.S. companies to tap roughly $300 billion of Russian central bank assets frozen in Europe for a U.S.-Russian investment project and a U.S.-led reconstruction of Ukraine. And then US and Russian companies could join to exploit the vast mineral wealth in the Arctic, apparently is what all this was about. And for the Kremlin, the Miami talks were a result of this strategy that they developed before Trump took office of trying to bypass the traditional US national security system and convincing Trump's administration to see Russia not as a threat, but as an economic opportunity. By offering a multi-billion-dollar rare earth and energy deal, Moscow aimed to reshape Europe's economic landscape and drive a wedge between the US and its allies, which is definitely going on. Every time Trump has one of these other 28-point plans and wants it done and signed by Friday, it fucks everybody off. And frankly, in Europe at the moment, everybody is fed up with this. We talk about brand America this week, sadly. I feel like every time we do an episode, we don't talk about brand America now because, so you've got this situation with the Afghan allies where it looks like America's turning its back on people to support them. And then you've got Trump doing this with, haranguing Europe and Zelensky, and it's now looking like America's kind of an unreliable partner for European security. It's not great. Now, what is going on behind closed doors, I can't quite figure out. Between Trump, Witkoff, Kushner, and Rubio, I honestly have no idea because this peace plan allegedly, the 28-point peace plan allegedly had Russian support, yet Putin rejects it. Now, obviously, the plan got diluted in the last week prior to it being presented to Putin, and then Putin turned it down. But how did this 28-point peace plan get pushed and then kind of renegotiated? It's just, I just don't quite understand what's going on anymore.
I don't either. I've
lost track.
I very much lost track. It's hard to follow unless you're just dialed into it 24/7.
I know, honestly.
Do we know entirely? Because there was that concern that Rubio was saying that the 20-point plan was just straight up a Russian plan that they that Rubio just offered us, here's the deal, and then it came out.
Well, I believe it's Witkoff who's responsible for that plan, not
Okay,
Rubio.
and
I
then
think Rubio's I think
Right.
Rubio might be the sane person in the room. I could be wrong, but my impression is he's the one who seems to be the one who's challenging the Witkoff-Kushner thing. But I could be wrong there. But that's the impression I get.
Senator Rubio would very much not be happy with the deal that Secretary Rubio is having to sort of quarterback. I'll say that much. That we never really got a clear answer as to what is the provenance of that 20-point deal, who it came from, and sort of what involvement the U.S. versus the Russians had in doing so. I mean, I know it came out that leaked that Witkoff was sort of advising the Russians on how to get sort of a favorable hearing by the Trump administration, which should, I mean, there's a lot. They should probably be done with that.
Yeah.
Kind of a counterintelligence issue, to say the least.
Oh, definitely. But there's something that made me laugh in this article. Apparently, even Putin's fed up of Witkoff now. So apparently, he wants a real diplomat to come in.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to if he wants sort of like a normal sort of structures of how this stuff is negotiated between these working groups and everything. That would, of course, require our national security community to be structured in a way to be able to deliver that. And right now, it's not. It's these
and
sort
a proper State Department representation.
It's these sort of ad hoc advisors who are kind of, real estate brokers from New York who sort of had some contacts with Bibi and Russians in Israel. So, okay, he can do it. And then Jared Kushner is now back, who is a private citizen and has conflicts of interest out the ass as far as all of this stuff is concerned.
And a very wealthy individual now because of these conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's madness. I honestly don't know really what to make of it anymore because it's so complicated to keep track of. It really is.
It's messy. I don't know where it's going. I will make the prediction that this, final offer terms of the deal that we had a few weeks ago with this, we're going to have that again, and it probably will not be the final offer. So next time this comes up, keeps that in mind, that it's probably chill a bit.
Well, this is it. It'll be some drama. Oh, it's got to be signed by this date, and then this will happen again. And the thing is, if the Trump administration genuinely threw this kind of pressure on Putin,
you could go ham on the oil refineries and just end the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, the EU are doing something now. I tell you what is happening is like just yesterday, the 3rd of December, the European President Ursula von der Leyen, she has basically said that the EU has reached a provisional agreement to fully phase out Russian fossil fuels. They took their time to do that, but they've done it. Good on them for doing that, but could have done it sooner.
Good.
And they've also agreed to mobilize Russian central bank assets to fund a zero-interest reparations loan for Ukraine, with Kyiv only repaying once Russia ends its war and compensates Ukraine. And the loan is designed to provide $90 billion to Ukraine, 90 billion euros to Ukraine over the next 2 years. So that is a positive. And then I noticed as well, Vladimir Putin made this sort of great statement that, if Europe wants a war, we're ready for it. And I mean, they've performed quite badly in Ukraine, quite frankly, and they've lost so many assets now. And if they had a war with NATO, they'll lose a lot more assets. I think the only thing that really Russia has that is scary is nuclear submarines and nuclear weapons.
And the disinformation voodoo that they're able to do. They're not a conventional threat to us.
No. And in fact, you bring up disinformation. One thing that needs to be put on any future peace deals with Russia is an end to their disinformation efforts.
I don't think you're going to get that.
No, but you need it because otherwise...
I know, but I don't...
Yeah, I know. Because otherwise... Because this is what's gone wrong in the past as well. I mean, like, Putin... he's been pumping out so much anti-Western nonsense for so long. And it's causing so much damage now, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, it needs to be addressed.
You're not going to get them. You can address it. You're not going to address it by getting them to stop.
No.
This is what they do. This is the lion tearing apart the gazelle. It's just what it does. You're going to address it by fortifying our own societies to be more resilient to it than it has been.
Yeah, and so obviously that requires education at schools
It's a lot harder.
about this. It requires what you used to have at the State Department, which was a dedicated office and team to counter misinformation. But I think thanks to internet culture of the last 20 years, everybody distrusts authority so much now that any old bullshit goes so far now.
I wonder if there's even a government. I mean, this could be this could be a whole episode. I won't say a whole lot on this. I wonder if there's even sort of a government, if we're at a point where there's even a government solution to that issue, or it needs to just be a societal, slow, gradual with education and public awareness campaigns that are outside of government and just media literacy and the private sector doing the right thing and just clamping down on this on their own, not because the government orders them to do it, but because it's just right to do. I mean, this is very hard thing to unwind. It's not going to be as simple as the Russians are going to agree to stop. That's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
And a lot of people of parental age sadly believe half the bullshit.
Oh yeah.
So, and are so deeply suspicious of their own governments, some justified, some not, that how on earth do we get that going? And I know other countries like Finland, etc., do have plans that we could look at, but
they're much smaller. They're much smaller countries. They're
different
ethnically
cultures too.
homogenous. Yeah, different cultures. The just complexity of here or in the UK, even it's just a completely different ballpark. I mean, yeah, they're doing good work over there, and that's important stuff. But it's just that you can't take that and just be like, "We'll do what Finland's doing here." It's not. It's a different situation.
Yeah. Well, just to finish up, so the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, made some comments, and so he made a statement yesterday just saying, finally, NATO is a defensive alliance, and we will remain a defensive alliance, but make no mistake, we are ready and willing to do what it takes to protect our 1 million people and secure our territory. And then he added very diplomatically that Trump is still the only person who can break a Russia-Ukraine deadlock. And
he's probably right.
I think he's being very generous with that last statement because I think Trump's now making it worse.
Well,
and I'm wondering if maybe there's some way we could get Europe to handle this, but good luck with that.
Yeah, as unhelpful as he's being in this whole situation, I question if. I don't think you can just ignore the president of the United States in a situation like this.
No, of course he can't. But I think also the president of the United States shouldn't ignore Europe either.
Well, yes, totally.
Which, to be fair to whoever's interfering with Witkoff and Jared Kushner, whether that be Marco Rubio or there's some adult in the room somewhere in the Trump administration who does at least seem to be trying to play by the normal diplomatic rules. Thank you to whoever that is. But honestly, everybody else seems to be nutcases with so many interests to line their own pockets. It's quite concerning, really.
This team is not aligned. And it shows. I think a lot of the issues with Witkoff is just naivety. He's not a professional. This is not what he does. He has his own conflicts here. I just again I think I made this comparison before. He's like what was the guy in Die Hard who comes in, Hans Bobby, I'm your white knight. He's like that.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
He's like that.
Yeah. Ellis.
That's it. Yeah.
Ellis, bless him. God rest your soul. God rest your soul, Ellis.
Yeah.
The last Coke he ever drank.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, he is very much that, isn't he? Yeah. Well, Ukraine definitely needs a white knight of some description, but it doesn't need an Ellis. So
no.
And it could do without Hans Gruber as well, but there we go. Oh dear. I try to think now, if you made if you're trying to do an analogy of the characters of Die Hard with this situation, who is who? I have no idea anymore.
I think Budanov's probably John McClane.
Yeah. And I think Trump's the FBI guy in the helicopter, isn't he? Played by Robert Darby.
It's not a bad one.
All
right. Let's move this along.
Yeah, well, let's go to Venezuela, sunnier climates and
Yeah.
another national security crisis in the making. So
Yeah, so I'll get this going
Yeah.
here. So while everyone's been watching the Ford carrier group parked off Venezuela and the additional 15,000 U.S. troops deployed to the region, wondering if Trump is actually going to pull the trigger, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, speaking of Budanov, is pointing to a quieter piece on the board. A disgraced Russian general running an advisory mission inside Venezuela. In an interview with the War Zone, Budanov says Colonel General Oleg Makarovich now commands the Russian Defense Ministry's Equator Task Force in Venezuela. According to documents he shared, Makarovich oversees a rotational contingent of just over 120 Russian personnel, about 90 in Caracas, with others at 3 other locations in the country, training Venezuelan forces in infantry, UAVs, special operations, and providing signals intelligence support. Budanov stresses this deployment predates the current U.S. buildup. What's new, he says, is that Makarovich's tour appears to have been extended. None of this has been independently verified, and the documents Budanov provided can't be confirmed, but if accurate, it means the man fired by Putin after Russia's defeat in the Kherson offensive in October 2023 and accused by Kyiv of ordering the Nova Kakhovka Dam destruction is now quietly embedded in a country the U.S. is actively threatening with regime change. On top of that, a senior Russian lawmaker claims Moscow has supplied Buk M2E air defenses. Budanov says those are visible on the ground and has threatened to send more standoff weapons and possibly Shahed drones. Budanov's assessment is that if the U.S. does take kinetic action, the Russian contingent will stay off stage while Moscow tries to use their presence as leverage. And when asked whether Ukraine has its own people in Venezuela, all he'll say is, quote, "We collect all the information about them. So make of that what you will." Chris, what'd you think of this?
Yeah. Oh my God. Venezuela is another mess at the moment, and it's a very loaded topic. And I suppose I'll just say up front, just in case anybody thinks that we're running this article because we're somehow supportive of military action. We're not. Well, at least I'm definitely not supportive of military action against Venezuela, and I can't believe you are. I think it's this whole thing is it feels very unnecessary, doesn't it? Somebody asked me just the other day, an American friend of mine texted me and asked me what the kind of view in Europe and the UK is about Venezuela. And I think the mood really is, it feels a bit like the 2003 Iraq war again, and it's sort of starting to feel a bit like, because Trump's using, sort of talks of cartels as this sort of excuse for potential military action, which is a totally overblown way of dealing with the cartel issue. And I know the DEA were kicked out of Venezuela in 2005, and certainly the Venezuelan government are far from perfect. They're very much agitators as well. But I don't think military action is the response needed. And I mean, there's still a question whether there even will be military action. This could also, again, be another Trump bluff where he kind of appears to overreact about something as a negotiation tactic. That sort of feels like gunboat diplomacy is kind of going on at the moment, and hopefully it will lead to diplomacy and not the gunboat side of it. So all that aside, it is very interesting that obviously this key Russian guy and other Russians are in Venezuela. They were there obviously before this started. And if American forces do get involved in Venezuela, they could actually give the US a very bloody nose in Venezuela, because the anti-aircraft systems and stuff like that could shoot down American planes. So if Trump is in the belief that Venezuela might be an easy thing to make him look tough, he might want to rethink that, if that's where he's going with this. I don't know. It's difficult to tell at the moment. For the Russians, could also this be a little bit, could their people being there and them getting involved with potentially fighting American forces be retribution for Ukraine in their eyes? I mean, there is a possibility of that. But I think what this really is about, Venezuela has been allied with Russia both historically and recently. They've just signed this new strategic partnership treaty. So they signed it in May and enacted it in October of this year. And it's been described as the most ambitious bilateral agreement in over 2 decades of cooperation between the countries. And the treaty lays out a sort of 10-year roadmap for deep cooperation across major sectors, including energy, finance, security, infrastructure, research, communications, mining, transport, and technology. And both governments have ratified this treaty. And it sort of elevates the relationship to a long-term institutionalized alliance between Venezuela and Russia. And Venezuela becomes the only Latin American country with a full strategic partnership treaty with Russia, hence the military equipment and people there. And it puts himself now alongside Russia's core global partners, which is China and Iran. And to me, this relationship is a little bit reminiscent of the Cold War, in which the Soviet Union sought allies in South America to counter US influence in the region, and they backed like left-wing governments and movements and offered military and economic support that was aimed to create kind of political foothold that challenged Americans' dominance. And the goal was less about controlling the region and more about spreading kind of quote unquote socialist influence to weaken Washington's strategic monopoly. And today's Russia's interests are more pragmatic than ideological. It kind of, it wants to build ties with countries to resist US pressure, which is especially like Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. But they also want to project influence close to the United States to kind of gain partners in this multipolar world. And modern cooperation focuses on energy and arms sales, and then political alignment. And access to natural resources seems to be the goal of Russia's relationship with Venezuela, a bit like with what Trump's trying to do with Ukraine and get these sort of mineral deals in place. I think this is sort of, should I say the beginnings? I think it's been going for a while, but natural resources are coming up a lot more often now. Access to minerals, things coming up a lot more often. In the 10 years that we've been in this show, this has been coming up a lot more in the last sort of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think in the next decade or so, this is going to become even more. And I think even with Trump's thinking, there is, like with his talks about annexing Canada and Greenland, I think that all links into access to vital minerals and things. So it's a very complex situation. So I'm not surprised that the Russians are there. I'm sort of surprised about who's there, but I'm not surprised that there is sort of Russian influence in Venezuela. But I don't think it justifies then America blowing the crap out of Venezuela either. So there we are.
Yeah. I mean, I think Maduro is a tyrant. I think his regime has led that country to absolute ruin, going back even before Maduro to Hugo Chavez, his predecessor. That said, I would, if Langley and JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command, wanted to, and this will be a controversial view for some, and that's fine. I think well-intentioned, rational people can disagree on this. If JSOC and Langley were to get more aggressive with cartels in Latin America, I would welcome that. I think we're doing similar things to those effects in Mexico right now also. I haven't had a negative word to say about it because I think if we're doing this, it should not generate headlines, and it should follow the law, right? And it should not be done through a regime change war, if that's sort of what the Trump administration is gearing up to do here. I would also like to sort of see CIA Special Activities Center get more aggressive with the supply lines of precursor chemicals for fentanyl that comes out of China into Mexican ports. I'm actually writing something along those lines right now, spoiler alert. But that said, I think this is very much what we have been seeing in Venezuela right now is very much Marco Rubio's baby, and being Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, among a number of other titles that he has, really sort of puts him in the driver's seat to conduct stuff like this, especially when there aren't sort of people around him in that sort of national security kitchen cabinet that have the chops to really sort of like push back. I don't know that we would have seen something like this in the first term. I think this is very much a second term kind of idea. They talked about stuff like this, but they were never able to sort of pull it off or put the pieces in place to do something really kinetic about it. Rubio's sort of grand strategy here, it's been said, is his belief that taking out Maduro and his government will be the key chess piece that causes the Cuban government to fall and other sort of lefty, anti-American-ish other governments that are in Latin America and will create a stronger bulwark against China in the Western Hemisphere, right? That's his theory of the case. I'm just saying. Now, if you were to sort of if you were to present that vision to me as a think tank white paper or some sort of like an exercise, like here's the outcome that we're going to have in Latin America. Do you think that serves US interests? Is that good for US interests? I mean, academically, yeah, okay. I just have severe doubts and concerns about this crew's ability to pull that off effectively. And what they're playing footsie with here, to me, if done not well, okay,
which is likely,
half-assed, right? A couple, big explosions overnight, and Trump says, "Okay, that's it. We're done now. We declare victory. We go home." I see this as a very easy way to get a string of PLA bases in Latin America in a few years, and that's what worries me about this. And also to that point, the Venezuelans, I mean, they're not a real conventional threat to us at all, but they're not slouches either. I mean, we're not talking about the Houthis in Yemen or ISIS and lobbing a few cruise missiles at them, and they don't have the ability to sort of strike us back, especially within the Caribbean. The Venezuelans could absolutely do that, especially if, Russia stated its openness to arming Venezuela with Oreshnik hypersonic missiles. I question whether they have the capacity to actually do so or even aid Venezuela in any meaningful aid, while so much of their combat capacity is tied down in Ukraine right now. We saw this same quagmire with the Assad regime's collapse in Syria last year, and the Russians' pretty tepid response to U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran over the summer, where they pretty much just sort of sat along the sidelines and just had to watch, be like, good luck, guys, we're over here. We can't, but they could certainly cause issues for us, especially around advice on combat tactics that have matured on the battlefield in Ukraine. Shahed drones could be a big problem, which they can certainly mass produce at scale, even start doing domestically within Venezuela. And the other thing here is, don't forget, China has none of these scarcity issues and would love to quietly bleed us out in our own hemisphere.
Yeah.
Well,
a couple of things, just pushing back on what you were talking about. I think the problem is with kind of kinetic or non-kinetic forced regime change, it never works.
No.
It always tends to lead to something worse or unexpected. Then America has a bad reputation in Latin America
because of stuff like this.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is a lot of young people, up until probably recently in Latin America, did look to America in a positive way, despite that history. And I think what the Obama administration was trying to do with normalization of relations with Cuba, even though it was controversial with kind of Cubans, exiles, and maybe people a bit right-wing, and again, not perfect. Normalizing relationships with a dodgy regime's hardly perfect, but then Trump's hanging out with Saudi Arabia at the moment, so pick your dodgy regime.
Yeah.
I think what America would be better off doing, and it would be a long-winded way of resolving this situation, is actually finding a more diplomatic stroke PR strategy to win over Latin America to America's side. And why not be installing American military equipment in Venezuela instead of Russian, etc.?
Right.
You know what I mean?
That would require patience and would not look good on Fox News.
No.
Would not provide the sugar high that they want.
But it would probably provide a more stable long-term future.
Yes, it would.
And would probably less likely lead to calamity, which is where I think we're heading.
I don't I don't think this is going to be like Iraq in 2003. And
It won't be as
please,
long-winded as Iraq.
no,
Definitely
I
not.
don't think it's going to be, if this kicks off, I don't think it'll be anything like that. And please feel free to throw all your rotten vegetables at me if I end up being wrong here.
From a PR point of view, it will be. It will be seen as Trump's phony war to make him look powerful because he's pushing obviously his anti-cartel thing, but most of the cartels connected to Venezuela have nothing to do with fentanyl. And account for less than 10% of the drugs that go to America. And then, even though the war probably won't go on very long, it will again look like another phony war America's got itself involved with through dodgy intelligence and etc. So it'll be again bad for brand America.
My best guess right now, just educated guess, knowing what we have and how we tend to operate in these situations, and also what Trump is usually willing to stomach. I mean, plenty you can say about him when it comes to committing himself to sort of serious long-term wars overseas. So far, his instinct has been to avoid that stuff, right? That's not. I'm not saying that as a credit to him. I'm just saying this is how he's been, right, in the decade that he's been on the stage here, right? Given that, I think if there is some sort of strike in Venezuela, I think it will come from the air, from the forward strike group, bombers, strategic bombers based in the U.S., other assets that they have in Puerto Rico. I think they're going to use JSOC to go right for the jugular. I think they would use JSOC to go right for the jugular of the regime, take out Maduro, and have it be sort of very quick and surgical and gone. I think that's their idea of how they would want this to go. How it would work in practice and the consequences if you get this stuff wrong is a very different story. And like I said, I highly doubt this crew's ability to sort of achieve the neat objectives that I just outlined here. I think that's how it would look. I think it's also, whereas sometimes I wonder, you don't put all that stuff down in the Caribbean to then just pack up your toys and go home and not do anything. I think it's also very much not off the table that they end up doing nothing. Here's something else I'll tell you. There are U.S. troops in Venezuela right now. And I'm not saying that because I've been told that or because it's been reported somewhere. I'm the CIA Special Activities Center. They have people on the ground in the country, and also JSOC's First Capabilities Integration Group, known within the command as Task Force Orange, sort of their expeditionary intelligence arm. They're definitely in Venezuela right now. Again, not because I've been told that, because it's been reported. I'm just telling you that's how this works. They're there right now.
Yeah. I have no doubt you guys have the capability to achieve those objectives. I think you've got the wrong team, as you've said. And I don't think it's the right thing to do.
It's what happens after you remove Maduro. If the objective is just to remove Maduro, yeah, we could do that tonight, right? It's what comes after that I worry about, that they're not thought through.
Again, Iraq, that led to ISIS. Obviously, I don't think you'll have something quite like ISIS out of Venezuela, but it could lead to what you talk about with PLA. It could lead to all sorts of blowback.
Don't also think that the cartels would just sort of melt away into the jungle, never to sell their wares again, and the Americans' extreme appetite for illegal narcotics would just evaporate. That's not how this works.
No. Well, I can tell you in the UK, totally different thing. In the UK, we had these terrible small CO2 type capsules that everybody was using to put into balloons. And everywhere you walked on the streets, you'd find these little bloody capsules everywhere. Government banned them. And now people are using bigger capsules that aren't banned.
Yeah.
People will find a way to get
This is a whole of society tricky. I mean, people have been trying to do this for years.
You can ban alcohol, people still drink.
Yeah, I remember the local township cop who came to my elementary school for the DARE program, and I mean, to that, no one has ever offered me drugs for free. I don't think that's a thing that happens. But again, this has been our issue with drugs and the supply of narcotics into this country has been a chronic issue for decades. And this is a sugar high that they're trying to follow here. They may do something. They also, They may not. It's just how they are.
Well, it feels very Reagan era. I mean, a war on drugs
It
been
does.
tried before.
It feels very Panama.
It does. It feels very, let's go for the greatest hits of the 80s. What will please Reagan era Republicans? Oh, let's get tough on drugs again. It just feels a bit like we've tried this before. I mean, hell, have you ever, there's a film with Tommy Lee Jones about using Apaches to take on drug cartels that came out in the early 90s, Nicholas Cage. It just doesn't work. It's a societal problem. It's a health crisis problem. It's very unsexy things that will resolve. A bit like with the Afghan soldier, elite soldier who shot those people in DC. Ultimately, is a very humanistic approach. Probably would resolve that before it got to that situation, and it's just not very good on Fox News.
I think there is an effective and responsible way to employ our Title 50 covert action authorities against drug cartels in Latin America. However, I reiterate, it should not generate headlines. It needs to follow U.S. and international law, and it must be done in concert with a whole bunch of other efforts across law enforcement, the rest of the intelligence community, to sort of tamp down those cartels' operations and supply lines into the United States and address the underlying societal issues that draw Americans to want to consume those illegal narcotics. It's not just you send some secret squirrels off into the jungle to blow up a drug lab and yay, that's it.
Yeah. If there's a demand, there'll be a supply. I'll throw it the other way around because usually it's supply and demand, isn't it? But if
It's
people want
capitalism,
to
baby.
do drugs, yeah. And it's the thing. I mean, like half of the knife crime in the UK is connected to rich people's drug habits. That's the unfortunate truth of it. So as long as people want to buy cocaine or whatever, or fentanyl, whatever, this is why I never liked drugs, actually, is the food chain. There's so much suffering in drugs to get your moments of joy or whatever it is, or relief, or just that high you're getting, but it comes at the cost of other people's suffering. And so, I've met some very so-called spiritual people who do a lot of drugs and have never thought about it in that way. So it's like, so there we go. So yeah, one last thing I suppose I would ask is, you're not advocating for the kind of thing that's been going on with what Pete Hegseth's been up to with like bombing boats and stuff, because it just might be worth clarifying that.
I said it should follow the law.
Yeah.
And it should not generate headlines.
Yeah. So more disruption and stuff like that kind of thing,
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a complicated thing, and it's the thing. I think I've said this before with other things Trump's related to. There is a real world complicated issue that is getting messy because Trump has decided to try and employ military action to resolve this situation. And it's a bit like what we were talking about with Greenland earlier this year. There is a strategic necessity for America to have a relationship and a presence in Greenland, but it doesn't require America to invade it and take it by force. But because Trump has said that,
there's a point there.
There's
a point in there somewhere. If you squint really hard, it's just being executed in the dumbest, most irresponsible way possible.
Exactly. Because Trump has said, I want to invade this, it has totally changed the debate to the wrong place. Same with the whole idea of taking over Canada. NORAD needs upgrading, satellite black spots, etc., maybe even better integration between Canadian and American forces, maybe. But you don't need to take over Canada to do it. That shouldn't be the debate. The debate should be sorting out NORAD, etc.
Yeah.
And these are the things. This is, I suppose, we're kind of almost at the year for the Trump administration, and it's kind of the legacy of the Trump administration, from what I'm seeing so far, is taking real world issues and making a real mess of them. And then we don't talk about the actual issue. We talk about Trump's response to the issue.
They're cratering here fast, man. I think where they're going to be in a year from now, when the midterms come around, it's not doing well. Whether someone's listening to this, I doubt if they sort of fit this bill, they're sort of still listening.
Well, thank you if you are still listening. But
yes, thank you if you are. But I think if bought into this administration with the promise of what they were being sold, okay, that's one thing. I think it's pretty fair to say objectively at this point that it's just not going well.
No, it's yeah, indeed. Well, shall we look at the Islamic State?
If you'd like to.
Yeah, let's let's go to Syria. So the Islamic State has resurged in post-Assad Syria and is exploiting the power vacuum created after HTS toppled Assad and a group of looted weapons depots. They've rebuilt an insurgent force of several thousand fighters and continue to demonstrate its ability to strike even in Damascus. ISIS survives through patience, adaptability, and outlasting adversaries, benefiting from global distractions as major power shifts resource away from counterterrorism. And now in northeastern Syria, ISIS has already launched more attacks this year than in all of 2024. The group now operate as a decentralized insurgency using small cells to conduct ambushes, assassinations, IED attacks, extortion, and kidnapping, particularly in eastern areas where local support remains strong. A major grey rhino threat looms in the form of prison breaks, with thousands of ISIS fighters and family members held in overstretched Kurdish-run camps. And ISIS has a history of orchestrating jailbreaks to replenish its ranks, and a major breakout is considered highly probable. ISIS remains a global network with active affiliates, some of which are in Africa and South Asia, and now have enough resources to funnel support back to its core in Iraq and as well as Syria. And the group's organizational structure, such as the General Directorate of Provinces and Al-Qaeda office, continue to coordinate transnational operations. So I think everybody should be concerned about a rise of ISIS because, yes, at the moment it's far away, but we've seen. I mean, I remember just 10 years ago, we had this wave of these sort of quote unquote lone wolf attacks where people would drive a car into a crowd. You had the terrible events in France. We've had, Germany, we've had attacks here that all have their roots to ISIS. So I think all of us, not to scare you, but should be concerned about ISIS and keeping an eye on what's going on with that in the new year. But anyway, Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, ISIS has certainly not been banished back to the void from whence it came. Eastern Syria hosts a number of smoldering fires that could still spark back into a much larger blaze. There are real tensions between the Syrian government and Kurdish militias in the area that could cause some real ugly scenarios if they go sideways. There's a prison in eastern Syria that hosts thousands of ISIS POWs and their families. That's still there. That's a Chekhov's gun placed on the shelf that is, I don't like that at all. When I spoke to Aaron Zellin on this podcast back in September, he said the risk of President Shara being assassinated is really kind of like the event that could really set the whole country off again. So there's a lot of lingering issues there. ISIS, of course, being one of them. Next year on my list of shows to do, I want to do an episode focused just on Eastern Syria, where we'll hopefully get into this stuff a lot more closely.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to highlight this story not because I have an amazing insight into what's going on with ISIS. I really don't, but I just want to remind people ISIS is on the rise and they're active in Africa and the Middle East. ISIS typically like failed states. They can thrive in them and they get, they're unchallenged by local authorities and they can gain the support of the local population by providing basic services such as electricity, food and water. And they can also provide security from crime due to their sort of tough measures. And so they can win over a fearful population quite quickly who are desperate and tired of lawlessness. So if ISIS get hold in Syria or any other country, they undoubtedly will use it as a base of operations like Al-Qaeda did with Afghanistan. And then they'll focus on their enemies abroad, which will be the West and possibly Russia. And I will say one positive thing with the Trump administration, because I guess I owe them at least one positive thing.
Now say something nice.
Yeah. So it has been good that the Trump administration and the international community see the value in doing what they can to support the current government of Syria under Ahmed al-Sharaa. Despite his past allegiances to al-Qaeda, But I think sometimes it's important to remember we do need to bring back former enemies into the fold for a greater peace. And, hopefully Syria will work out, because Syria does also have other challenges at the moment with terrible ethnic violence that's going on. And al-Shara's government have not exactly done the best of job of sorting that out. And even potentially been accused of being participating in some ethnic violence. So it's definitely not a perfect situation. But I think the real goal from an international community point of view is helping create stability there and making sure Syria does not become a failed state, because that's what ISIS likes. ISIS loves failed states.
Yeah.
And if Syria falls apart, it could get really bad. So that's my insight there.
Thank you for making that point. I agree. I am happy with so far with how the Trump administration has handled Syria. I'm glad that they are bear hugging the new government and President Shara. I think that's wise and prudent, and we should do everything we can to ensure that the Syrians have a chance to follow through on this experiment to clean up on the nightmare that they've been through. And see that we don't get back into the mess that we had there, because the consequences of that were disastrous for a whole lot more than just Syrians.
Yeah, indeed. Let's take another break and be back with more. Right, well, welcome back, everybody. So we've got 2 listener questions. Now, I'll let you go the first one because it revolves around Pete Hegseth. So, Matt, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this next story comes from Colin in Virginia. Thank you, Colin, who sent us Tom Nichols' latest piece in The Atlantic about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, asked for our take on the latest with him. So at the center is a specific operation. According to Washington Post reporting, back in September, U.S. Navy SEALs from DevGru, SEAL Team 6, hit a vessel off the coast of Venezuela that the administration says was running drugs for the Tren de Aragua cartel. Whether that boat was actually moving drugs can't be independently confirmed. What matters for Nichols' piece is what allegedly happened next, that Hegseth ordered a follow-on strike to kill the survivors, a no-quarter order that, if accurate, would constitute a war crime under U.S. and international law. So the White House isn't denying that a second strike took place. Instead, the line now is that Admiral Frank Bradley, commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, ordered it under authority Hegseth verbally delegated to him. Nichols thinks that's implausible. An officer in Bradley's position would understand exactly how explosive such an order is, would almost certainly seek explicit civilian sign-off in writing, especially on the first outing of a new operation. He then zooms out to argue this fits a broader pattern, Hegseth as the embittered former major using the Pentagon to settle scores, haranguing senior officers, sniping at Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly's medals, slapping Department of War signs on the building, and in the middle of a war crimes storm, posting a Franklin the Turtle Commando meme on X, tagging U.S. Southern Command as if sinking boats and killing survivors were a joke. Nichols' bottom line is blunt. While Trump is president and staying put, Hegseth, unelected and in his view dangerously unqualified, should go. So let's pick it up there. Chris, we haven't actually really talked about this even offline much. What's your take on this?
Well, I think I agree with Tom Nichols. I think to be polite, Pete Hegseth suffers from serial poor judgment.
I wasn't. You're prepared to be polite here. What I got here on my screen, I was not prepared to be polite. So you go ahead and
I'll tell you what, I'll make you feel better. So the video of him putting up the Department of War felt like small dick energy to me. That was ridiculous. That was absolutely ridiculous, that video. And then obviously this tweet with the meme of Franklin the Turtle shooting at boats is deeply unprofessional. I mean, crikey. And sort of making a mockery of what potentially is a war crime. And I don't know if you saw just before we went on air, and the Atlantic ran a new piece about how a new Pentagon report has concluded that Hegseth risked endangering troops with his signal messages earlier
Signal
this
Gate.
year.
Yeah. Shane reported
Shane
on
Harris is involved in that. Yeah, so we might have to catch up with him in the new year about that. So I'm starting to wonder, because Hegseth's future was looking a bit wobbly over Signal Gate, and then he kind of somehow got through it. But now that's back, plus the war crimes accusations, and obviously the Trump administration this week helped Hegseth by dodging that by blaming an admiral now. Some admiral got the blame
Admiral
for it.
Bradley, the head of SOCOM.
That's it. Yeah, when it, when he was doing Hegseth's dirty work, effectively. I'm starting to wonder if Hegseth's days are numbered and whether he will become a sacrificial lamb for the next administration as they look to clean up the Trump administration's damage to America's image. I would happily give Pete Hegseth over to The Hague if I was the next president of America, in some sort of way.
We'd have to sign on to that treaty
Yes,
first. It would be
that is true. That is true. But
that's a whole
maybe
that's a whole thing. That's a whole thing.
Yeah, and rejoin the Paris Accords and the Geneva Convention.
we're still part of the still a party to the Geneva Convention. We haven't signed on to the treaty that backs up the International Criminal Court because we don't want our own officers and personnel accountable to it, because the belief is if something happens, we'll handle it here.
Yeah.
Nowadays, that's not so clear. Hopefully, we'll get back to that. But anyway, I digress. We'll leave that one there.
Yeah, no, totally. So so there's not much else for me to add, really. I just think that Hegseth needs to go. And I think Tom Nichols did a brilliant job of articulating why he should go.
Well, we were together, I think, when the news popped up on my phone that Hegseth was nominated as Secretary of Defense. I believe we were in an Uber going very, very close to the Pentagon at the time.
I remember your reaction when Tulsi Gabbard was.
Yeah. You saw my live unfiltered reaction there. I was not happy. No. I was not happy that day. I had to collect myself. Anyway, I'll say this. I think Hegseth, and I've said similar things to this effect on this podcast before. I think Hegseth has been adding strikes toward his second strikes toward his eventual demise since his Senate confirmation, which of course required, let's not forget, the vice president's tie-breaking vote, dragging him across the finish line in a Republican-controlled chamber, which just doesn't happen for a SecDef nominee. I mean, those are usually confirmed by huge margins up in like the 90s. Probably, if not unanimous, is what's typical for a Secretary of Defense nominee, right? No matter who the president is. That just doesn't happen, right? So that's warning sign number one, that he's on thin ice. And he clearly did not heed that, okay? Also, take note that since this came out in the Washington Post, Roger Wicker, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, a Mississippi Republican, and Jack Reed, the Democratic ranking member, released a joint statement after this news promising, quote, vigorous oversight to get to the bottom of what happened here. Now, that's normal order. Like, I'm not saying we need to like celebrate that, like, hooray, profiles and courage. That's normal order, the very least of how congressional checks and balances on the armed services is supposed to operate. But right now, normal order is not the norm. And so I think when we see stuff like that, it is a very good sign and something to, in a way, be like, yes, good, you're doing your job. You know, you're not making excuses and looking the other way again, as you have on so many other things for the past 10 years. So, like, good, do your vigorous oversight and find out what happened here. And I also think it's worth noting that the statement where they said this, again, released from the Republican-controlled Senate Armed Services Committee, referred to the Department of Defense and the Secretary of Defense, not this sort of sec war stage name that Hegseth has been using.
Or the SS Secretary.
Yeah, this. Yeah.
Oh dear.
So
yeah.
It's there's been a lot of bad signs for Hegseth recently. This sort of other thing aside, you know, Army Secretary Dan Driscoll was part of the negotiating team with the Russians in Geneva on Ukraine. He was sent to Geneva to help negotiate on this new deal over Ukraine, which of course is not part of the job description for the Secretary of the Army. I mean, they're not involved in diplomacy or negotiations. It's an organizational kind of administrative acquisitions budgetary job, right? It's not what the Secretary of the Army is supposed to do. And I think they sent him there, probably auditioning him to take over as Secretary of Defense, and because Dan Driscoll's boss is incapable, frankly, I think, of any serious work that doesn't involve try-hard, holster-sniffing photo ops.
Yeah. No, man. So yeah.
So the White House, to Tom Nichols's point that, it's time, Hegseth, like, you gotta go. Enough of this. And I think Congress is very quickly getting there too, right? The White House can certainly pluck somebody off the board of Lockheed or Northrop or wherever, or someone who has managerial and subject matter expertise toward the armed forces, who will still say all the MAGA buzzwords and suck up to Trump in cabinet meetings while running the Pentagon without stepping on rake after rake after rake after rake. And I think if this does eventually spell the end for Hegseth in his job, I think it's going to be because of stuff like that, just because the White House just gets sick of dealing with messes that his messiness creates.
A bit like Kash Patel, who's a bit on the thin ice at the moment.
Also getting there too. Tulsi Gabbard was there for a bit a few months ago.
Recovered so far.
She sort of faded back into the bushes, that Simpsons meme. She's done that quite a bit. I have no tolerance for this man. I've made that clear on previous episodes. I think he's manifestly ridiculous, arrogant, rude, pathetic, small individual who is in over his head and unworthy of the institution and the men and women he unfortunately leads in ways that are far more profound than he can even begin to grasp. He demands respect while giving none to those around him. He is among the very worst and least qualified of that cabinet, which is saying something. He's a bully, and I do not like bullies. So yes, I agree with Tom Nichols. In the name of God, Pete Hegseth, go.
Yeah, well said. Is there anything else to add, or are you happy with that?
Nope.
Good.
Again, thank you, Colin, for sending that in. Great to have the chance to talk about that one. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So our next story is from Tamara on Blue Sky. And it may be considered a cheerier one, or it may not. Depends on
a good one to end the episode on.
How you view
nice
this.
One.
Yeah. So apparently Russia have launched the first brain chip bird drone for surveillance over cities. So a Russian nanotech company called Neri has tested biodrone pigeons fitted with brain implants and electronic backpacks, allowing operators to remotely influence the bird's flight path without traditional training or conditioning. Neri's system uses implanted electrodes connected to a backpack-mounted stimulator, controller, and GPS and solar-powered electronics, enabling the bird to receive pre-programmed flight tasks similar to conventional drones. The company claims the birds are fully controllable after surgery, with pigeons using precise stereotatic methods. God, I've never heard that word before, stereotatic, but stereotatic methods to ensure high survival rates. And they've used cameras that are loaded with AI that apparently blur faces and comply with data laws. Now, Neri plans to deploy these biodrones for infrastructure monitoring, environmental surveying, industrial inspection, security, search and rescue, and they argue that these pigeons outperform drones in range and endurance whilst costing a similar amount, which I'm highly suspicious of that claim. How is a pigeon going to outlast a drone? I don't know that one. But anyway, the technology could expand to other species, including ravens, seagulls, and albatrosses. And Neri claims it's moving research into industrial scale deployment, positioning itself ahead of other similar experiments previously conducted in China, South Korea, the US, and India. So, Matt, what are your thoughts on these drone pigeons?
I'm kind of surprised that Russians haven't gotten around to deploying sharks with freaking laser beams on their heads yet.
It's coming.
It's coming. Just the term biodrone is like, let's not make these. That just seems like a bad idea. I mean, that seems like the sort of mad scientist characters, like, oh, my biodrones. Like, don't do that. We don't need that. I mean, there's also, on a more serious note, there are plenty of instances in history of intelligence agencies modifying live animals to gather intelligence. In the 60s, there was Operation, I love this one, Operation Acoustic Kitty.
Oh,
It was CIA.
yes.
So it's not just the Russians who are working on this stuff. The CIA implanted listening devices into a cat to eavesdrop on Soviet conversations, but the project was abandoned as impractical because it's a cat, and the cat's sort of like, "No, I'm not gonna do that. I don't care what you want me to do." Very cat-like. There are CIA birds and pigeon projects where they trained, ravens also to deliver or position small surveillance devices on hard to reach targets. Through World War I and World War II, pigeons were used by European militaries fitted with tiny cameras, automatic cameras, to capture low level area reconnaissance photos over enemy lines. What else? Pigeons have been used as couriers in I think during both world wars. Also, the Soviet and Russian militaries have used dolphins. The U.S. military also has used dolphins to detect mines, lost equipment, and enemy divers to secure naval bases. And of course, there was that beluga spy whale that was found off Norway not too long ago that had like a
Mm,
harness
mm,
that was suspected of being used by the Russians for nefarious purposes, surely
yeah.
against that poor whale's will. Um,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
so it's
No.
not, I mean, this is very much horrifying in the way that current times are often horrifying. Just the term
Mm,
biodrones again,
mm,
like, don't do that.
no.
And there's the AI thing. And this seems more like a mind control thing than just strapping a sensor on an animal and
Yeah.
letting it do its thing. But um, good story. Glad we got the chance to talk about it.
It is interesting one, isn't it? And it kind of, when I first saw that this came up, I did chuckle for a moment. I did find it mildly amusing, but then the more you think about it, the less funny it is. Like you were just saying, like pigeons have played a significant role in warfare and intelligence. In the UK, we actually had a department during World War II called MI14D, and it was the Secret Pigeon Service, and it was a volunteer network. They provided birds and expertise, and they deployed more than 200,000 pigeons during the Second World War. And these birds were dropped behind enemy lines with tiny message capsules that were used by SOE agents, downed airmen, and local resistance members. And some were even fitted with miniature cameras for covert reconnaissance. And then the Germans attempted countermeasures, including like hawks to intercept these British pigeons. But the British Secret Pigeon Service remained one of the most reliable low-tech intelligence systems of the war. And obviously their legacy continues to fascinate historians. And actually, Gordon Carrera of The Rest is Classified wrote a book about the Secret Pigeon Service.
Mm,
So
should get him on.
well worth checking out. And but with regards to these sort of spy pigeons, so if the idea is that these are going to be used for surveillance, and looking at the images of the pigeons, I think I'd be able to spot this pigeon a mile away. It's got a huge battery pack on it and a big wire going to where its brain probably is. I think when you think more about it, what is a bit disturbing is that obviously this thing is being controlled through neuro controls. The fact that you can influence the behavior of birds that way is getting into that kind of Twilight Zone meets Black Mirror meets the X-Files territory, depending on which show you wish to subscribe to there. And that aspect is worrying, and it kind of gets us into that territory of the famous CIA MK Ultra program, which obviously came about as a result of fears about
Good point.
Soviet mind control research and techniques. And yeah, this whole idea that you can kind of control a living creature through electrodes and make it do things against its will is quite creepy.
And ethically just
And
weird.
ethically, yeah, from an animal rights point of view, it's horrifically
It's just a
cruel.
scientific, like it's not right.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right.
Yeah, it isn't. And I'm sure Russia's not alone in developing stuff, because if Russia are developing this, then I'm sure the West is going to be looking into this technology, even if it's just to look at how to counter it, or whether in time you might be able to control a human this way, which we might well get into that Manchurian Candidate, remote controlled assassin territory if we're not careful. So, the stuff of fantasy slowly becoming the stuff of reality. And so this whole spy pigeon thing, as funny as it sort of is on the surface, like who do like the idea of the secret pigeon service, etc. But at least with the secret pigeon service, they were training the birds to do this stuff. They weren't like using horrible electrodes to poke and prod them and make them do things kind of against their will. So yeah, very different sort of kettle of fish there. But there we are.
I have an acoustic kitty who's been circling my feet for a little while we're recording. He woke up a little bit ago.
Oh, bless.
He's quite acoustic when he's yelling at me for breakfast at 6 a.m.
Yes, cats do love to wake up their owners for early breakfast, and there's always a slippery slope on the timings, if I remember from when I had a cat. So yeah. Cool. Well, that's pretty much us done. So just wrapping up then, obviously, if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget you can support us directly on Patreon and get access to the ad-free version of the show. Go to patreon.com/secrets and spies. If subscription is not your thing, that's absolutely cool. You can just go to Buy Me a Coffee and buymeacoffee.com/secrets and spies and choosing them out there. And again, like I was saying at the beginning of the show, please share, recommend this podcast to anybody who you think might enjoy it. It really helps us. I want us to keep the show going for as long as we can. Maybe my dying breath might be on this show. Who knows?
I want to do a lot more with the show. It comes down to resources and just bandwidth.
It does.
Like I said, two guys on opposite ends of the ocean. We run into bottlenecks sometimes, but there's a lot I want to do with this.
There's so much. I mean, I feel like we're at capacity as we are. We produce a weekly show now.
Sometimes twice, but once in a while. But yeah.
And it's like, and there's so much more we could do. I'd love to do like sit down interviews, even documentaries of people on video, go to locations. Did a bit of location stuff this year just to experiment, to try and find the appropriate format to, go to a museum, etc., and report back on it. And also just be able to go to historic. So I'd love to go to Bletchley Park one day and do an interview with some of the people there and film the park itself, and go to other places of historical interest from an espionage point of view. There's so many things we could do, but again, it's just time and resources and budgets. So it's there's a lot of things. There's a lot of potential here. And hey, if somebody's listening who would like to somehow be a partner in this and who can help us with those resources, whether
if you
it's
run a production company, call us.
Whether it's financial, whether it's social media support or whatever. I mean, our lines are open. As long as you're not an agent of chaos from some hostile government.
Your name is Semyon from a questionable time zone, asking to collaborate together.
Oh my goodness! So as long as you're not sort of with a bit iffy, we would be very interested to collaborate, etc. So our lines are open. You know where to find us. Just go to secretsspiespodcast@gmail.com. That's where you can email us. It's in the show notes. Just also before we wrap up, just say again, huge thank you for your support. I hope you have a wonderful holiday period, whether it's Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever it is you're celebrating. I love this time of year. It's a nice time to wind down, catch up with friends, family, watch some movies, enjoy some lovely food, etc. So but Matt, so you were about to say something there.
Well, this is it for Espresso Martini for the year. We'll be back in January, but that doesn't mean the podcast is going silent. We're going to have regular episodes every Saturday and a couple Wednesdays, looking at the schedule through to when we get back.
And you can look at my schedule right there. I've still got like 7 episodes to finish before we
there's still a lot in the pipeline.
And
cool stuff for next year too. Cool stuff for next year.
Yeah, there is. Oh no, I've already there's 3 interviews I've pushed to next year now that I've already recorded. So it's like prioritizing. But no, there's so many things that we are doing. I'd love to be doing more, etc. It's wonderful that we're getting a lot of interview requests, much more than we can handle at the moment. But that's a kind of a good place to be. I mean, crikey, considering this as a this should be a monthly show, now it's a weekly show. Massive difference. And there's no shortage of things to be talking about. So I hope you are enjoying the ride as much as we are. So thank you very much, everybody. And again, enjoy the holidays, enjoy them as responsibly as you can, and as safely as you can, but ultimately just have a good time. And yeah, check in on us. We'll be still putting out episodes every Saturday over the holiday period, and we will catch you in the new year. So take care, have a great Christmas, happy holidays, and happy new year.
Thank you.
For listening.
Bye.
And if you're still there, doubly thank you. See you later.
Thanks for listening. This is Secrets and Spies.